So do you ever wonder if you're a good writer or not? Today's video is going to discuss 7 reasons you might actually be a better writer than you think. So I wanted to make this video not to say that there are certain things that all good writers have to do, if not, you're not actually a good writer, but to help other writers who might be struggling with confidence. I found when I was still trying to learn how to be a confident writer, I was doing a lot of these things, but I just didn't acknowledge them as things that were making me a better writer. And by no means is this an exhaustive list, nor does it mean that you have to hit everything. If not, you're not a good writer. I don't agree. This is not meant to be a video for beginners because these are things that you're going to learn how to do. This video is more aimed at folks like me who've been writing for a number of years, but aren't sure if they should yet call themselves a good writer. So these are a few reasons that you might actually be a better writer than you're giving yourself credit for. So the first is that you feel you have a grasp on your style without having to consciously try. I remember very distinctly when I realized I'd started to develop my writing style. It was about 4 years into writing constantly, and then it took a further 2 years to feel like I'd grasped my style. And now that I've been writing for 8 years, I feel a lot more secure in my writing style. Now, it's really important to note that writing style is ever evolving, but a marker that you may be a better writer than you think is that you no longer have to consciously try to achieve a writing style. At the 4-year mark, I noticed a bit of a style in my writing, but I had to put effort into maintaining it and also learning more about it. And I was learning by reading things that I liked and applying the craft to my own craft. But now I don't have to rely so much on other people's work, nor do I feel like I need to constantly tweak the line level to feel like I have a style. It took literally like 8 years. But we're here now. So the second reason you might actually be a better writer than you think is that you're secure in your writing even when people don't like it. When I was prepping for this video, I found a similar article on Medium, and I'll link it in the description, and they had quite a similar point. I liked how they discussed it in that article, so be sure to check that out. A huge part of becoming a better writer for me was learning that my opinion on my writing matters. This is not to say that you shouldn't listen to feedback, but that a good writer, a confident writer, may be able to separate which feedback they choose or don't choose to use. For example, I've gotten so many personalized rejections on short stories where the magazine might have some feedback for me, and that's very appreciated. The thing is, some people might make drastic changes when they get feedback on their writing or a personalized rejection, for example. Or even if they just get like a form rejection on their story, they might go and re-revise it. This is ultimately up to you. If that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do, and that is what works best for you. But as I've developed as a writer, I've learned that a rejection doesn't mean that my story or my writing is bad. I used to think that those things were synonymous, and then as I started submitting, I started to realize that that just wasn't true. Critical feedback doesn't mean that your story is bad. Now that I've sort of developed as a writer, I understand that I can choose to or not to listen to that feedback, but at the end of the day, I can choose. One of my stories received a really brutal personalized rejection about a year ago, just maybe a year and a half ago, actually. It knocked the wind out of me when I got it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it made me feel like, yeah, maybe like the story wasn't as good as I thought it was. And obviously the magazine didn't mean any harm by the personalized rejection. They're just, giving some notes. I was like, oh man, like I thought I really liked this story. So what I did is I reread it. I reread it with an open mind. That's really important. Check out my video on bad habits that all writers should stop doing, because reading with a negative mindset has destroyed my perception of so many pieces of my writing, but I digress. I reread the story fearful that, what they said was true, and that, I had quite a few large scale changes to make, even though I really believed in the story before this rejection. But I realized as I reread the story that I didn't agree with the reading that this particular magazine had. That's nothing against the magazine. Reading is very subjective. Things that people like or don't like in writing and what they read is going to differ. However, what I did was I decided to stand by my work in the exact same draft that I had sent them. A year later, it took a year of submission. That story will be published in a couple of months. If I had seen that rejection as oh man, this is like a really bad story, and they did have a lot of feedback, I might have ended up changing a story that didn't need to change. So what I'm encouraging writers to do is listen to what you want. Like if you get feedback and you're like, I'm not sure about that, You don't have to feel pressured to take that feedback because somebody gave it to you. And it doesn't mean that your writing is bad just because somebody else didn't really like it. I like it, and that's what matters the most. You'll find your audience. Truly, not everybody's gonna love everything you write. And the moment I accepted that was when I started to feel a lot more free with my writing process. So number 3 is that you have an understanding of what you like to write. So a writer that is developing might have an idea of their kind of favorite things to write, whether or not it's a point of view or like a certain relationship or a certain setting. When I first started writing, when I was first like really developing my craft, I wasn't really sure what I really liked to write because I was just experimenting. And that's the most important thing to do in that stage. As I've really developed my craft, I've begun to understand the things that really make me tick, the things that make me excited. And those are the things that I like to spend a lot of time on. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have variety. It just means that you found something that you particularly excel at, you know that you excel at, and you like doing it. Number 4 is that you understand how to consciously apply or not apply craft to your work. Getting better at writing can also mean getting better at understanding how writing is constructed. You're not just writing anymore, you also understand the theory of writing. This can apply to the feedback you get on your craft, whether or not you want to apply it or not for what you were trying to achieve. A good writer, a writer who has really developed, will know how to apply certain craft elements to their vision. So number 5 is that you can acknowledge both your strengths and your weaknesses. Being able to see what you're good at and what you're not great at in writing, I think is a marker of a writer who has developed quite a bit. And that's because it's really, really difficult to see your writing in more objective terms when you're first starting out. But as you kind of gain more experience, you begin to understand how writing works. You begin to dissect your own writing. You may notice that you're starting to understand the things that you're particularly good at in writing and the things that you need to work on in writing. And particularly writers who can understand their weaknesses and actively work against those weaknesses and to improve those weaknesses, I think are on a great path. And that's because acknowledging your own weaknesses is a very difficult thing to do. To be able to look at your writing and point out, oh, this is where this is not working. This sentence is awkward because of this particular thing or this particular phrasing. This scene isn't working because of this particular development. Those writers show an efficiency in problem solving. And now it doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect at problem solving or that these things won't ebb and flow. But if you know your strengths and your weaknesses, you know how to improve for the future. And I think, in my opinion, that a good writer is a writer that's always evolving. So number 6 is that you make informed decisions regarding your work. And this can include whether or not you want to persevere with a project or quit a project. So when you've really started to develop as a writer, you may notice that you better understand how to make decisions that work best for your writing process. You're no longer just writing because you're writing, but you're writing for a certain reason, or you're not writing something for a certain reason, and you understand why. I've noticed that as I've gotten better at writing, I've also gotten better at quitting things because I know when it's time to say goodbye to a project or let a project rest. And on the other hand, I also know when it's time to just keep going in a project, even when it gets very difficult. I find that I don't struggle as much to rectify the space between those two things. Now I can acknowledge what I need in the moment from a project, whether or not I don't want to write it anymore, or I just don't need to for XYZ reason, even if that reason is that I just don't want to, or I'll continue it because I know that I can. The important part here is that I can make that decision consciously. A lot of the decisions I made when I was younger were not really like made purposefully or with intention. Now that I've gotten sort of better at writing, I've noticed that my intention for a project, for a story, for a chapter is at the forefront of my mind, and I'm aware of it. Most of the time. There are always exceptions, but in general, I think it's a great marker if you feel like you've gotten better at making intentional decisions when it comes to your writing. Number 7, the final point for this video, is that you know you will constantly evolve as a writer. I hinted at it before, but writers aren't just set in stone. It's not one and done. You practiced and you made it and you're just going to write the exact same way for the rest of your life. It's one of those art forms that you continue to improve at. I think all art is like that. It's not a formula. You're going to continue to develop as you go. And that's something that I have accepted and that I'm excited about. I know that the me 6 years from now is going to look back at the writing I wrote now and be like, I don't know about that. And I know that the writer I am today does that to the writer I was 6 years ago as well. And knowing that that's not a bad thing, but a great thing, I think is a great step forward. Writing is an evolutionary process. For the rest of your life, for the rest of the time that you're writing, you're going to get better at it. Of course, it's not a linear progression, but it's more like stairs. But at the end of the day, you're sort of still climbing upward as you continue to write. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about writing, is that it's kind of constantly in bloom. So those are 7 reasons you might actually be better at writing than you think. Let me know if there are other things that you've personally noticed in your own writing as you've developed. What do you think has changed between when you were newer at writing to where you are now? I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts, but for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.